talking last class, on Tuesday. Here, let's close this. We were talking about the Moses Well by Klaus Schluter. The Moses Well is a term that we've given it as historians. It's, as you might guess, it's a well, and we'll see that in a second. This is a statue that's had on top of the water source for the monastery, and that's kind of an important part of it. But we started to look at a few of the figures on the Moses Well. It's got 6 facets, 6 sides, the hexagon, and on each side is an Old Testament prophet, a figure who foretold the coming of Christ. Right? So we have Moses with the 10 Commandments. We looked at the nubbins on his head, talked about the fact that those came from a mistranslation of the Bible back in the early days that had since been corrected, but it remained Moses's a way of identifying Moses to the viewer, as if, I guess, the 2 tablets he's carrying weren't enough. But what we were focusing on primarily was the degree to which Klaus Schluter achieves a sense of realism. And a realism achieved not through a return to ancient Roman art, like the Italians had done. In fact, they didn't have any Roman art to look back at, so that's really not even an issue. But rather, achieving a sense of realism through a sort of almost microscopic interest in detail. A rendering of every single wrinkle, every single hair. A realism that is almost more realistic than what you'd see, in a way, more observed. Right? He's not finding some sort of perfected ideal that a Greek or a Roman sculptor might have found, but rather looking at the particulars with an exacting observation, and right down to the costume, which we started to look at on Monday. I got a chance to go to Dijon for the first time a couple summers ago. I was doing some research in Bruges. I took the train down. In fact, I got a video, which is kind of cool. Let's see if I can make this play. Maybe. I was hoping this was going to work, and it doesn't want to work. Maybe I need to use the touch screen. See what happens here. I'm going to turn off the pen, see if that makes a difference. There we go. Right, and so we're going to walk around it. By the way, keep in mind that I'm holding my cell phone and with one hand against the wall. Right, so that's why it's a little on the jittery side. But it gives you a sense of the three-dimensional quality of this. Right? I got lucky. There were no school kids there the day I was there. I was there by myself, which was quite lovely. And we'll look at some really good photos of all of these. But again, remember, it's carved on all 6 sides as we move around it. Right? And you can see the figures are incredibly lifelike, all 6 of them, each one individualized, and each one with the same amount of interest in details of characterization of wrinkles, of blood vessels, even the costumes themselves. And as you can see with all of them, the clothing, and in fact the entire sculpture, was originally painted. Right? We're used to seeing sculptures where we see the stone or the wood it's carved from. But that was not the norm in the Middle Ages, and here these were originally polychrome, multicolored, to the point that it would have even enhanced further the sense of realism that we see. So there's another view. We're going to work our way around a little bit, right? So we see King David with his crown and the harps on his robe and identified down below. And then with also the robe painted with these broad stripes. And then next to him, I believe this is Zechariah to the right, but I wanted to bring him in to continue to talk about this level of realism, right? Look at this is carved out of stone, right? Sandstone. But you'll notice, or limestone, but you'll notice that he's carved the individual pages of the book, right? And the lifelike quality persists right down to Zechariah originally had wire frame glasses that fitted to his face. And you can see he's squinting, isn't he? He's like me, I got bifocals down. I hate him. I'm always like going like this so I can read, you know? And there's a sense of the way he's looking at that book that he's trying to squint through glasses that he's wearing, and even mucking up his face a little bit as he's contorting it simply to see them. And that realism made this really quite a special work, very widely recognized in its day. People would travel for miles just to see it, right? Another view as we work our way around, you'll notice the angels up above as well. We'll talk about them in a second. And here are now two more prophets, Daniel on the left and Isaiah on the right, and that lifelike quality that's not necessarily a sense of inner psychology like Donatello had, but it's more vibrancy and realism. And you look at the two figures, and they kind of lean like, who's that around the corner from me? You know, and trying to almost communicate with each other as they look on either side of that column that separates them, right? They heard each other, and they're peeking around to see who's there and communicating. And there's a nice close-up of Isaiah's face, where again you can see the degree to which Klaus Schluter is interested in these tiny details, rendered as realistically, hyper-realistically as possible. And the effect that the polychroming, the painting would have had, if we look, for example, at the pupils in his eyes and how realistic that starts to become. Another view around the back of his head, you can see old man veins on his head here as well, like he's pulsing with blood, you know. And again, what a great beak, right? Look at that nose, so terrific. Not stylized or idealized or perfected at all, but every single hair carved individually, all of the veins carved individually, all the wrinkles on his face, as he concentrates. This is all a hallmark of what we're going to see from art in Northern Europe. Right? We're looking at Italy to begin with, but now we're north of the Alps. We're in particularly the Duchy of Burgundy, and which is not a country anymore. It's part of France, Luxembourg, Belgium, Holland, right? Even little bits of Germany are part of the Duchy of Burgundy. And at this time, it was one of the wealthiest areas of all of Europe. It was an independent political entity, and Schluter's working for the Duke, the head of the Duchy of Burgundy, Duke Philip the Good of Burgundy, or Philip the Bold of Burgundy. Now, what we're looking at, this over-life-size sculpture, is just the base for something more. Originally on top of it, and it was not in a building, it was in open air. On top of it, there was a crucifixion scene, again, over life size, with figures gathered around the base of the cross. The Virgin Mary, Mary Magdalene, St. John, gathered around the foot of the cross, and then Christ up on the cross above it. So it towers way overhead, right? You have to imagine this going up. It already goes up a good 15 feet. So you have to imagine going up almost 30 feet over your head, right? In the middle of this monastery. And our prophets here are only there to guide our eye to the main focus, which is Jesus on the cross, right? They foretell the coming of Christ. They foretell the Messiah. And as we look past them, each of them holding their prophecies on these scrolls, looped over his shoulder or hanging down, as we look past their prophecies, we see the thing they prophesied. We see the man they said was coming, and that's Christ up above on the cross, right? Suffering for all of mankind. And the fact that this was only the base for something more explains some of the details we see. These angels that are over the shoulders of each of the prophets. There are 6 angels on the corners of the hexagon, and each one of them is weeping because Christ is dying up above. In the online session, when we looked at Giotto, we saw the angels in the sky crying at the death of Christ. When we looked at small panels from the International Gothic style, we saw angels gathering the blood of Christ around his feet. Here they are between the prophets and Christ up above, which is all but lost. The torso remains, right? We've got this, like, without the arms and sort of down to back here, right? And the head. But the rest of it, the French Revolution, they started to destroy all works of art that had anything to do with the French king. This was commissioned by the brother of the French king, so it suffered, right? Well, the angels are here specifically to mourn the passing of Christ, to set a mood of sobriety, of somberness, of sadness, that we can actually begin to, I think, read also in the faces of the prophets. That there's a sort of a downer of a mood, because the theme is not them. They're not the focal point. They're the introduction to something more, which is the death of Christ at the above. Again, each of the angels particularized every bit as much as our prophets are. We hadn't seen him before, but I love his hat. And you can see that there's a sort of sad look for the prophets, but again, our angels up above are just weeping and wailing and drying their eyes. Their faces contorted with sadness for the passing of Christ up above, which is exactly what the prophet said was going to happen anyway, right? When they foretell the coming of the Messiah, they talk about the sacrifice he has to make, right? So this is all part of the deal. Another video here, I think, right? You can see it was originally a well down below. So this sat in the middle of a cistern at the bottom, right? So when you go there, it goes down by about 10 feet as well. And at the bottom was a natural well, right? That allowed, and we'll go back down again, right? That provided the water for the monastery. And that's an important part of the overall theme of this piece, which is that that's the water of life for the university, for the monastery, right? That provides their sustenance. But theologians talk about the fact that Christ is the water of life. So what you have is this sort of multimedia production where Christ is bleeding up above, right, coming down toward us. And the water of life that we use in our everyday life is therefore rendered more symbolically important, because the monks of the monastery would have associated it with Christ's sacrifice, their physical life associated with that spiritual life as well, right? So rather poignant multimedia work. Rather forward-looking for the early 15th century. Right? I'm trying to think of what's coming up next. Let's see what I've got here, right? Klaus Fluter, so remember, he's working in the city of Dijon, right? Mustard capital, right? Just here, which is all part of the Duchy of Burgundy under the Duke of Burgundy, right? And he's working in a monastery that the Duke has funded, Duke Philip the Bold. Burgundy funded this monastery with the idea that the monks would help pray for his salvation, but also it would be the burial site for him and his heirs. Right? Sons, grandsons, and sons would all be buried here as well. Right? And Klaus Fluter, in addition to the well of Moses, also sold the figures for his city, which still survives in the museum in Dijon. So he's working here. Yeah? On numerous projects for the Duke of Burgundy. But originally, Klaus Fluter came from the region of what is today Belgium. So he was in Dijon, but he's from Brussels, right? That's where we can document his work prior to coming to Dijon. That's where he was trained. So one of the important things to remember as we're looking at these artists is that wherever they might work, whether they're working for the Duke of Burgundy, or maybe the Duke of Berry, or even the French king in Paris, the majority of the artists in Northern Europe are coming from this little region here, which is today Belgium. And almost all the court artists working for the French king, the brother of the Duke of Burgundy, are also from what's today Belgium. We're going to look next at the Duke of Berry. His artists are from the region of Limburg, which is sort of over here. Right? So, where the artists come from and where they work are often two very different things. And it's important to remember that already we're looking at this interest in extreme realism being a sort of character trait of what is today Belgium. And will continue in artists in the 15th century that work in that region. And it really sets it apart from art in Italy, which is more interested in perspective and ancient Roman art. Both of these are paths to the same end, which is realism, right? One through details, one through perspective and Roman art, getting us to the same point, right? So this region is called Flanders. I'm sorry my arrow got a bit whacked off there, right? They called it Flanders at the day. It was a small county ruled by the Count of Flanders, got swallowed up into the Duchy of Burgundy. To this day, the Belgians call this region Flanders, right? There's in fact a Flemish separatist movement. They want to split Belgium in half. And the people who speak Flemish, which is a Dutch dialect, want to be separate from the Walloons who speak French, right? Well, that's not really all that important, right? The important thing is this is where Luther had come from, is this region of Flanders, right? And I don't know why these are animating goofy like this, but that whole region is Flanders. That should have come up before. Okay, also from the same region of Flanders, but working for the Duke of Berry here in this region of France, the Duke of Berry is another brother of the French king, just like Duke Philip the Bold was a brother of the French king. John de Berry is another younger brother of the French king. And there are three brothers, John, Paul, and Herman, the Limburg brothers, who work on a manuscript. This is a book, an illustrated book, for the Duke of Berry. They actually made three different manuscripts for the Duke of Berry. They all have picked up nicknames. This is the Very Rich Hours. We'll talk about what that means in a second. Right? There's one that's called the Small Hours. There's one that's called the Brussels Hours because it's housed in Brussels. This is the Very Rich Hours, the Très Riche of John de Berry. Right? And it was made by these three artists working together. They didn't sign the work, but we have documents from Jean de Berry's court that talk about the payments he gave them for making this work, right? And it shows, in fact, here again, right? They're from Flanders again, so blah, 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 blah. I know those are coming off goofy, right? And Jean de Berry is in the town of Berry. So I just didn't animate this as well as I thought I had as I created some new PowerPoint. So sorry about that confusion, right? So our Limburg brothers come from Flanders. They're working for Jean de Berry, just as Klaus Luther came from that same region to work for Berry's older brother, the Duke of Burgundy. Okay? Now, this illustrates, I think, to a certain degree, that the way in which the realism of the North is different from the realism of Italy. Masaccio was very much interested in humanism, human interaction, human interchange, right? Perspective, tying into this, geometry playing a role, even in some of his works, right? Ancient Roman art being revived in many of the figural poses. But we really don't see any of that in the Limburg brothers. What the Limburg brothers are interested in, just like Klaus Luther, is the minutiae of detail. The tiniest things rendered. And this entire book, right, this page of the book is about like yay. You'll never see it, right? I've been teaching this stuff for half of my life. If I go to where this is housed in Chantilly, France, they wouldn't let me see it. Because every student who sits in an art history class sees it, and everyone wants to go see the real thing. And you can't even get good pictures of it. It's hard, right? Because they're trying to preserve it now from the sticky, dirty fingers of thousands and thousands of art history students. Right? And profs, for that matter. Okay? I want to show some details of the foreground here so you get a sense of the detail that we're seeing in this work. So here's a nice close-up of the very foreground. We see a man spreading seed, right? It's a activity that you might associate with October. He's planting seeds that will come up in the spring, and you can see directly behind him the guy on red on the horseback has that sort of crudely constructed plow, which is a wooden frame with spikes in it, and then to weigh it down, he just puts a rock on top of it, right? And you can see he's plowed part of it, where it's all nice and soft, the dirt is, and the rest has yet to be plowed as he's going to go work his way back around that last row, right? And in the soft dirt in the foreground, you can see our figure here is spreading the seeds, is walking, and he's got little footprints behind in the softened dirt. Right? To emphasize that. He's got the apron there full of seeds. He's sprinkling them down. I don't know if you can see this, but you can actually see the seeds dropping out. And again, remember, the entire page is like this. So these are dots, right? Here, dropping down. And there's this bigger batch of seeds, probably his lunch as well. Here, and the dangers of being a peasant farmer, birds are gonna eat your seeds, aren't they? And you'll notice in the background that they come up with this ingenious way of keeping the birds away. They've got a scarecrow, right? There's a bow and arrow drawn. But they're going to scare off the birds. But more than that, there's this really cool thing where they tie twine between these sticks and little ribbons of fabric hang out, and they flutter in the wind, and they make noise and they scare the birds away, right? And so there aren't any birds back there where they've already spread the seed, right? And that danger is signaled here in the foreground, right? Is that manure from the horse? I never noticed that before, but I think it is, right? It's sure, right? And there's a little bit of fertilizer, if you will, being spread, right, by our figure. Notice that our working man, our peasant, is got ripped clothing, right? He's not wealthy. This is part of the old feudal system, right? This is really hasn't disappeared up north, unlike in Italy where we have these merchant centers. Here he's the indentured servant, right, working for his lord who should protect him in times of need. If we look across the river, however, we start to see some of the city residents. The people may be freed from the feudal system. And look at the detail again. They've got various figures simply milling around. We see reflections in the water of the figures that are walking along the shore here. We have a little doorway that allows us into this walled city. You need to see a figure coming out of that doorway. If you go, once you get through this class, you realize I'm a sucker for dogs. I love dogs. And there's a couple of cute little ones there goofing off, right? Nobody cares. They're outside the city playing. The fellow in the background casting a shadow against that wall, right? And these are just, again, tiniest of details. But it's important to render the activity of the city. And it's almost as if, on the other side of the river, we have a different sector of society. We have this new urban class that's associated with the Renaissance as opposed to our peasant class in the foreground. I like the whip as well, the detail of the whip of the man in red as he's asking his horse now to move forward. Another detail of that city in the background with our pointing dogs just so we can see more of the degree to which the Limber brothers are focusing on detail. That's exactly what we saw how Snyder doing as well. What is a book of hours? The Trerish was the hours part of that. It's a prayer book. A book of hours was one of the most popular kinds of prayer books for lay people to use. Lay people are people like you and me, right? And it would be used for private prayers. And what it did, the book of hours, was tell you which prayers stay on which day. And the reason it's called a book of hours instead of, say, a book of days is because it's modeled after monastic practice. Monks prayed at set hours during the day. They had a schedule of prayers, right? So the seven or nine canonical hours of the day, right? The one that we hear of most is Vespers, right? It's even a James Bond chick named Vesper, right? Comes from that one of the old monastic hours. So when the lay people, the normal non-monastic people adopted the practice, the guide for what to pray when became known as a book of hours, even though it really just breaks it down day by day. Okay? So if you open this book, you're sitting here, you're Jean de Berry, and you've got your book, you open it up, front cover, right? And the first thing that you see is sort of some introductory material. You turn the page, and on this side will be, on the right side, so where my old sign-in sheets are here, would be a calendar. This is a calendar for October. Right? Padre, right? And opposite it, on this side, would be the monthly activity associated with October. And so you start on January, right? January, February, March, April, blah, 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 and work your way through December. Those are the seven prayers. And then what it is, is very important. Where can I find the prayer? What page do I turn to? To find the prayer said on this page. And the reason we need it is the rest of the book is not set up on the annual calendar. It's set up by different groups of prayers to different kinds of saints, to the Virgin Mary. So these groupings, we needed a way to figure out where to go. You can look at the groupings as groups, or you can look at them from where you have to pray that particular day. And it tells you who to pray to on each day, right? Saint Croix, Saint Denis, Saint Mark. What's this? On the 16th? Wait, one? Yeah, let's say, one. I just missed my name, right? And you can find out where you can pray each day, okay? This is my common book of hours, the guidebook for prayers. And we call these images of the appropriate activity for the month the labors of the month. And they go all the way back to Roman art. We can find images of the labors of the month all the way back to the 2nd century AD. It was a fairly consistent tradition from that point forward. So this is a very long-standing tradition. They're not reviving Roman art. It never really went away. But that idea that the image in the prayer book is linked to the calendar, right, is also emphasized by the zodiac sign up above. And you see the zodiac signs for October, Libra and Scorpio, right, up above. And for Christians in the Middle Ages and Renaissance, you know, strict Christians today will say, like, oh, astrology, right? That's paganism, but they were all seen as signs of God. And we see astrological illustrations on churches everywhere in medieval Europe. It's hard not to find them, and they're usually always associated with the cycle of life, right? So that's what we're seeing here. This is the month of October, right? That puts it in some context, which is been associated with a calendar for what to pray when, and we can then work our way through and find that particular page. Like I said, this was made for Jean de Berry, the Duke of Burgundy, in the very first of the months. This is January. The activity associated with January, still called a labor, even though there's no labor here. The activity is feasting, beginning the new year with a feast. And Jean de Berry sits here. He's in blue, lower right corner, right in front of a fireplace. Massive sort of fire screen behind him. It almost looks like a halo, doesn't it? Flames licking up behind him, but there's an amazing table with gold boats for serving food, gold and silver dishes everywhere. He loved dogs, right? Look at the puppy in the foreground, getting a little bit of stuff from the food. Look at the little dogs on the table, those stupid little toy things on the table, right? Bad dog owner, right? Don't let your dogs get up on the table. But they're everywhere you look. It's about richness, right? And he's even welcoming people. It's addressing him, isn't it? He gets to open the book, and the first picture he sees with the January prayers are himself in this luxurious interior. They look like outside, but that's on the wall behind him, right? Beautiful here. Asking people, come forth, and they're all working their way for him, and they're serving all of this luxurious work, right? Everything in the book seems to be seen to his eyes. He's the primary viewer. That might come from that here as well. Like I said, I think it's like 50 dogs. He's a dog lover, right? But it certainly also has to go for the building in the background that's looming over the scene. That's identifiable. That's the Old Louvre Palace before it was renovated. That's what the museum is today. There's a part of it that's sort of been multiple times renovated in the 17th century in particular. But this is the Louvre Palace as it looked in the 15th century. Right? That was one of Jean de Berry's family palaces. It belonged to his brother, the king. And there are multiple buildings that appear through this that are meant to be buildings that he would recognize, buildings that he would associate with himself and his family. Right? And so this certainly plays directly into that idea. Okay? Like Klaus Schluter, it shows us this keen interest in realism, right? Down to microscopic detail. And we'll look at about 3 or 4 other pictures from this region, 4 or 5 other pictures from this region that do this even more so. Right? In particular, down at the National Gallery, this painting by Jan van Eyck. Really, for me, one of my favorite paintings in the entire city. Really, it's fantastic. It was originally part of a larger group of paintings. It was hinged to another panel or 2 that have since been lost. But that accounts for the way in which the angle of the building cuts in from the left, but not from the right. Right? It originally butted up against something, and it pushes your eye off to the right, which is where the hinges would have been. Right? Now, Van Eyck is from exactly this same region. He's from Flanders as well. The same region as the Limburg brothers, the same region as Klaus Schluter. In particular, he's from the city of Bruges, which is where he spends his entire career. And as we look at the picture, we can see, even without looking at details yet, that the sense of realism, the interest in detail, is particularly stunning. And Van Eyck is able to push this even further. How's that for a nice detail? On the left, it's a microscopic of the angel's robe. Van Eyck was accredited with having invented oil paint, being the first to use oil paint. Now, up to now, we've been talking about base tempera, right? Almost all paints you look at have been tempera. Okay? Those have lost points on it. Again, I spelled it with a U, and the professor wrote in the end, this is not Japanese food. Because the same one who always joke about calling it people of the 2 classes of people who are calling it. You should stick with it. Tempera, right? Cake base. Okay? The way you put tempera paint down is in a series of small strokes. You might lay down like a whole swatch of color like this. But if you wanted to modulate that color, you would come up with a series of small strokes. Simply because it dries okay. And we look closely at Giotto's Madonna from now, we sort of saw this effect, where it comes back into these little hash marks, right? That's almost like it's on with paintbrush. Oil paint, instead of laying down hashes over your base color, you lay down glazes. The pigment, the color, is blended into oil rather than into paint. And that means you can see through it. It's translucent. So if you look at the cross-section of the paint from Van Eyck, right, there's a base layer of color. And over the top of it is the oil base with these little crystals of pigment in them. So that means that that base kind of reflects through the glazes. And if you wanted to say make a purple, right, you could lay down a blue glaze and then go over the top of the red glaze, or vice versa. Right? And you get this sense of a picture where you start to even see some of that effect here, right? Look at how the darkest reds are glazed over this lighter red underneath it, right? And we're seeing the natural crafting of the work as well. This allowed Van Eyck to achieve even more spectacular effects. Now, he was not the first to use it, but he seems to be the first to really nail it, to figure out exactly what oil paint allows you to do. And what oil paint allows you to do is to create this sort of glowing picture that seems as if there's light from within, almost like it's stained glass or something, and the color's coming through. Because it truly is. You've got a tone underneath, and the light from your room goes through those glazes, hits the tone, and comes back out again. Right? So it plays in the classroom kind of like it looks, because we have a diamond screen here, you know, and reflects the colors back out again. You can go see this in person. It's fantastic. Bring a magnifying glass, right? Let me show you some details here. Well, I didn't mean that to come up so quickly, but nonetheless, I want to look back at the details and look back at our Annunciation from a few decades earlier, right? These are both from the same region. They might even both be from the same family. This, we think, is for Philip the Bold of Burgundy. And is working for his grandson, Philip the Good of Burgundy. Right? But you can see if you look at the two of them, that in fact a lot of things are similar, aren't they? Angel comes in from the left, takes the knee, wearing red, with green underneath. Right? Announces to the Virgin Mary with words on a scroll that you're full of grace, God is with you. Right? Remember the words? Ave, gratia plena, behold, full of grace, Dominus tecum, God is with you. Right? Archangel comes in, same thing. Dove coming down, all the daggers on the upper left. It's almost like you can see the wonder mountain. Right? Gothic arches behind her head, although we've lost the cloth of honor. Right? Book open as it happened. Remember that that book has her words in response. I am a handmaid. Behold the handmaid of God. Ege and Sheila Domini. Right? Well, here, Van Eyck, with all this realism, has quoted a lot of that, but very amplified, right? So Angel's robe is significantly more elaborate and detailed and jeweled. It's jeweled. It's got the details too. But also you'll notice there's the word hanging in there, as opposed to on the scroll. As if they're just sort of floating there in gold. Ave, this is an abbreviation sign, gratia plena. Right? The Virgin replies. Here she comes next. Right? And her words, as I gave them out of his mouth, she's talking back to him, so her words read this way. Upside down, so they read the proper direction, so they come out of her mouth. Ege and Sheila Domini. Behold the handmaid of God. Right? That is her response. It's the same response we saw in the book here. So some of the same things, but rendered significantly more realistically, except for maybe the words hanging in it. Right? But he needs that for the words to communicate. Right? Now, if you look up towards heaven, kind of past us, her lips are parted. You can see her teeth inside her lips as well. And you can also begin to see here the kind of detail that Van Eyck is able to achieve from using oil paint. More than a sculpture and sculpture, more than a liquor brush. Each hair has a highlight and a shadow on every hair. Right? I can't imagine how hard this is. And the painting is about stuff like that or so. Right? I remember he's painting with maybe a monofilament brush. Right? A brush with one hair to get some of these details. And in particular, then I seem to be caught up with the play of light through the building. You'll notice behind the Virgin's head there are 3 windows. We've talked before about the idea of the virgin birth, the moment of the Annunciation being tied up with the idea of light passing through glass. Right? Theologians had explained God entering the Virgin Mary because of her purity as being similar to light passing through glass. And Van Eyck gives us that in 2 or 3 different ways here. The windows behind her head, but also the dove of the Holy Spirit coming down on what appears to be very solid light, 7 beams, but they pass right through the window up above. Right? As if the dove had come through that window and not broken it, not an open window. Right? Light passes through glass and leaves it unbroken in the same way that God can pass, because of the purity of the Virgin, can pass into her and leave her intact as well. You'll also notice that everything here, these details, add up to enhancing the meaning, right? 3 windows, right? For Christians, a good, strong metaphor. The Trinity, we saw the triangular composition that Masaccio used a decade before this, and I didn't know that picture, right? But But Van Eyck is using the same idea of three, symbol for the Trinity. And you'll notice that the three windows are the same but different. One is red, around those mullions, one is blue, and one is yellow. Right? The same but different. Theology rendered through symbolism. Those mullions are painted fantastically. Some of them pick up the reflection of the Virgin's robe on this side of the glass. But most of them allow us to see the world outside, reflected upside down through that glass, because it's working like a lens, right, where you would see it upside down. So we see here the light from the sky picking up down below, and what appears to be a landscape behind it, but distorted through that glass, the world outside. We see some of it in the little side windows here. They give us a sense of how high the outside world is. So again, spectacular details, right? I mean, you couldn't even get more details than this, probably. If we go over that, I'm sorry, this is looking a little bit blurry now that it's huge. We're looking right here. Right? Looking at this detail right here. And you can see that behind the Eva Queen, that same landscape that we get the sense of here, continues over here. And then we've got a window where we can actually see through the window. Right? It's not distorted. So we actually see through the glass. And you can start to see, make out the building here, a multi-story building with a peaked roof. And up above the domed area, that looks like a church, perhaps. Behind it. Now, what's the point of putting that in there? Unless Van Eyck wants us to notice it. Eventually, as he invites us to scrutinize it. Everywhere we look, the details are profound and, like I said, almost microscopic in the way that they're painted. A lot of it has to do with the play of light. The angel is carrying this crystal scepter in his hand. And you can see that not only does Van Eyck really understand how light passes through the crystal, how the crystal looks different from the brass that holds it together. How light, when it hits it, will hit the beating it to the crystal and then reflect off the back edge on the inside of the glass. Right? He gets it in a way that shows you looking that kind of closely. And over and above that, as the hand wraps around that crystal, you can see how it also distorts. Because really, a crystal tube is a lens. And makes things distort around it. Everything is about detail. This is why I like this stuff so much better than Italian art. Heck with Italian art, right? Give me the Northerners any day of the week. Here's a close-up of the angel's jewels, and you can see that the jewels are handled in a way that you can tell the ones that you can see through, like those sapphires, from the ones that you can't see through, like the pearls. But you'll notice that on all of them, the lighting is consistent. Right? It's the same pattern of light and shadow across each and every one of them. Even when it comes to the gold brocading, he's laid down the gold and come over the top of it with highlights that give us a sense of that brocading. Here's another detail of that, right, where we can see the jewels come all the way down the front of the rope. How he's got the sense of that red velour, right, but being stitched with gold thread. Now, it's not painted in real gold. It's all in yellows and blacks. But it looks like it, doesn't it? And the pattern seems consistent because he spent that kind of time scrutinizing the model before he painted the picture itself. So, again, exquisite details, right? This is absolutely the sort of guiding principle for art in the 15th century in Northern Europe, and in particular in Flanders. Now, a lot of these details are chosen to enhance the meaning. Some of them are just show-offy. The stuff I've been showing you so far is just like, geez, what a good painter, right? What has he been able to do? But a good number of the details are also chosen to enhance the meaning of the work. Right? In this case, you can see the dove coming down from the left, It's a very nicely drawn dove, too, isn't it? Swooping down. So kind of, maybe Mary should duck. It's going to come down on her head. But you can see that behind the dove, in between the arches, are painted on the wall, these little wall paintings, murals, of biblical figures in circles, in axes. And they're labeled for us. It's Esau on the left and Jacob on the right. Now, we saw them briefly on Monday. They're the two sons of Isaac, right, Jacob and Esau. And they were seen by theologians as being prefigurations of Christ. Figures that sort of, in the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible gives Christians some sense of the character of Christ being foretold. So they're included here for exactly that reason. This is the moment when the Old Covenant, the agreement for salvation laid down by Moses and his law, is giving way to the New Covenant, the Christian salvation by grace. Again, in detail, we can see Esau there, and the dove now flying past him. Again, I've gotten so close that it's blurred out a little bit. There are more murals up above. If you look into the darkened area just underneath the ceiling around that stained glass window up there, you'll notice that there are more murals there. These have been identified, in fact they're labeled as well, as scenes from the life of Moses. Now Moses led the children of Israel out of captivity under the Pharaoh. That made Moses another prototype for Christ, because he leads Christians out of the captivity of sin. So the decorations within the church, the details that Van Eyck has put into the picture, are there specifically to enhance the meaning of the scene. Right? This is the moment when the Old Testament gives way to the New Testament. Christ is coming. He is foretold in these images. There's also, anachronistically, a picture of Christ in the stained glass. There he is, with the same scepter in his hand that the angel has down below, and holding a book as well. Right? Up above his head, cherubs, angels, overhead. So there's an anachronistic quality here, isn't there? How could you put up a stained glass window of Christ before Christ has even been born, before you, let alone come to be an adult? Right? But still, this is part of the symbolism of the scene. This is the moment when Christ descends from heaven through the light of God into the Virgin Mary, and that's almost exactly what's happening here, directly above her head. Fairly recently, this panel was cleaned. Fairly recently to me is 20 years ago. To you, actually it's 25 now. It's been that long. But when I was taking art history classes, this was dark up there. You couldn't see anything. And when the painting was cleaned, it became apparent that the roof was a mess. And I don't mean the painting is a mess, but beyond that, I painted the roof as if it were under disrepair. Right? In need of fixing. Some of the boards in the roof are missing and broken. This is again a detail that ties into the symbolism that Van Eyck is trying to get across. For Christians, the Old Covenant, salvation through Moses' law, Moses right there, right? Salvation through Moses' law was itself a broken covenant. It needed fixing from the Christian perspective. The arrival of Christ is that repair. So while this looks like a Gothic church, it's intended to be a temple. An old Hebrew temple that needs repairing. And that repair will come through the birth of Christ. That idea of a temple that needs repairing, of triumph over an old-fashioned salvation scheme, is picked up by the details in the floor. The floor looks as if it's been engraved. And the figures there are all labeled for us. In the foreground, David and Goliath. It's the scene after he's knocked over Goliath and he's about to cut off his head. We can imagine Donatello's David being a few minutes later, right? Standing proudly over the top of that head. The next scene back, Samson tears down the temple. That is theologically what's happening in the rest of the scene. The new Christian covenant, the new mode of salvation, is going to displace, tear down, triumph over the old way. Right? So all of the details, they work together. You know, they begin to compound and give nuance to the different themes that we see in the rest of the picture. Everything works together this way. You'll notice, by the way, the zodiac signs. Again, decorating, in this case, a temple, and that's not uncommon in works of art through the Middle Ages and Renaissance. I think I have one last detail here. These are the columns over the angel's head. And you can see that the first two column capitals are just decorated with vines, and there's a face here. Right? But as we go to the last one, you can see figures of it. And we've not identified exactly what scene this is yet, but it's obviously a battle scene. You have figures in armor on horseback, dogs running with them, carrying shields like the one we saw from Castanio downtown, right? Marching off into battle. That again ties into this scene that you see everywhere with the new Christian mode of salvation triumphing over the old ways. And this is the moment when it starts, the narrative moment when it starts, which is with the birth of Christ. Now, as I mentioned, this was made for the Duke of Burgundy. Not the same one we saw before. The Well of Moses was made for Duke Philip the Bold. This is now 30 years later. It's made for his grandson, Duke Philip the Good. Right? Both of them are the Dukes of Burgundy, just not at the same time. Right? Philip the Bold died in 1406. His son was Duke of Burgundy for about 10 or 15 years, got murdered in Paris. His son, John's son, Philip the Good, is now in charge. And Jan van Eyck is his court painter. He is the official painter to Philip the Good. Whenever Philip wants something painted, Van Eyck is who he calls. Van Eyck gets an annual stipend. It's kind of like being a lawyer on retainer. He gets an annual stipend, gets housing paid for, and he gets extra money when he goes to work. Okay? And he works not only for Philip, but for a lot of Philip's contacts, which is what we'll look at in that picture. Right? So, with Van Eyck, oil paint is allowing him to take this interest in realism that we saw with Schluter, the Limburg brothers, and take it to the next level, right? Really amplify it. Or maybe amplify is not the right word, maybe shrink it. Because the interest in details gets smaller and smaller and smaller, down to tinier elements. And part of that is because tempera dries quick. Oil paints dry slowly. You can begin to work it more, right? Spend time getting those details just right. This interest in using details to amplify meaning, he also uses in non-religious works. This is a commissioned portrait by the man on the left, Giovanni Arnolfini, although there's some debate on exactly who he is. We used to always say it was one guy, now it turns out that there's reasons it can't be. But he certainly is a member of the Arnolfini family. It's noted as such. There were two different Giovannis active in the city of Bruges. It's one of the two of them. This picture's in London, as opposed to the one that's downtown. And it shows Giovanni with his wife holding hands in their house, right? We have to assume that this is probably what the house looked like. And we can tell from the floorboards, which are unvarnished, that this is probably the entryway to the house. The place where you would first enter on coming in off the street before going into the rest of the chambers. And we also know from records at the time that this is where the woman of the house would greet visitors during the day. So what we have behind her is not a bed for sleeping, so so much as relaxing between visitors, and a very grand pillowed chair just beneath their hands, which is where she would greet people who would come in. Right? So it's a very grand house. This is the entryway to that grand house. As you can probably tell, they're an incredibly wealthy couple. There's a lot of symbols here for specifically their wealth. Right? And so here he is. Here is Giovanni Arnolfini. Who is this man? What can you tell me about Giovanni Arnolfini just from his name? He's Italian, exactly right. You know, Linguini, Sonatini, and Arnolfini, right? He doesn't belong here in a way, right? He's an outsider. He's an expat. He's an Italian living in Bruges when Van Eyck paints him. He is actually the local representative of the Medici Bank. He's working for Cosimo de' Medici. The Medici family bank was so large, right, so widespread that they had major banking centers, major bank branches in every city that was doing a lot of import-export. And Bruges was the biggest port in Northern Europe at the time. So he is there to represent the Medici banking interests in Bruges, right? The Medici are tight with Duke Philip the Good, Van Eyck's lifelong patron. In fact, Arnolfini lends Medici money to the Duke for his wedding. That shows how rich the Medici are, right? The richest man in Europe borrows money from the Medici for his wedding, right? And Arnolfini starts to help broker that deal, right? So with this idea of his status, this is probably how he got Van Eyck to work for him, right? Called in a few debts with the Duke. Hey, can I borrow your painter? Right. But you can see if you look at him, by the way, Putin, I was looking for pictures online. I kid you, this is back when Putin's first round, back in the 90s. I was looking for pictures of Arnolfini online, and I came up with this website that talked about the fact that Putin was the Antichrist, and see, he was alive in the 15th century. And they tried to use this as proof that he was like, you know, the undead. Very, very funny at the time. But look at that great hat, right? Look at the weaving in that hat. It's fantastic. What a thing, right? But more than that is the wealth that we see everywhere. Notice the rosary beads behind his shoulder, which are amber, right? Which is not cheap. His fur-lined clothing, right? Again, symbols of wealth. Ring on his finger. Her clothing even more so. Right? Look at the ermine-lined cloak that she's wearing. Those beautiful blue sleeves underneath. Look at the ruffles in her headdress. The tightness and the compactness of that. You know, ruffles anymore, we can even buy something at Macy's, you know, ruffles. No big deal, right? But ruffles are hand-stitched at this point in history. That kind of costuming is a conscious display of wealth, right? A conspicuous display of wealth. All of the pleating around her belt, right? More fabric than she needs to cover herself up. This is conspicuous consumption, right? The ruffs down below, look at those, right? And think about the handcraft that went into making a dress that looks like this. These people are incredibly wealthy. And everything in the room speaks to their status. It's a show-off piece. Behind them, carved furniture. They don't have utilitarian furniture, right? You can see three different carvings. There's the sink up above on that beautifully carved headboard for the daybed. Down below on the chair, there are two different carvings of little gargoyle figures down there, right? The lower hand and above it on that wooden furniture there. Everything is nicer than it has to be. Everything is as luxurious as it possibly can be. It's fantastic candelabra, right? A chandelier above their head. And it doesn't know perspective, and it doesn't work in one-point perspective, but I think it works as a three-dimensional object incredibly well. And that holds space. there. And again, his interest in the play of light that we saw in our Annunciation picture, his interest in constructing these shiny metal objects. And he's not leaving anything to chance, right? It's consistent where the brass finial hooks to the base of the candles. You can even see that one of the candles is burning. One of them is just burned out, and there's some wax there. Right? Can you see that fairly well? Let's pull the pen up here. Right? That one's got some wax dripping down it as well. So again, everything is as detailed as it can possibly be. With the idea of wealth, we look behind Giovanni Orfini, we see oranges. Not only on the cabinet behind him, but also on the windowsill. Oranges don't grow in Bruges. Oranges don't grow in the Low Countries. Oranges grow in Italy. Right? These are imports as well. And for us, going down to Safeway and buying an orange in February is no big deal. To have oranges in Bruges at any time of the year was a very big deal. They were not $5 for a buck, right? They didn't have that possibility. So these are luxury objects and should be remembered to be exactly that. At the same time, they're symbolic of Arnolfini. They're import objects, just like him. Right? They add to how we understand his character. Everything in the interior is meant to add to the character. And if we keep that in mind, you'll notice that a focal point of the picture. It's not the vanishing point. Right? There isn't a vanishing point. It doesn't work that way. He's not using perspective. But the focal point, the center of the picture, is this hand clasp. Right? He's taking her hand, and it looks almost as if he's blessing her with his other hand. The theme of the picture is not only their wealth, but the theme of the picture is their relationship. These two people and how they work together as a couple. With the idea of this being an image of a relationship. There's a cute little puppy down below. He's a scamp, isn't he? Right? He's an afterthought as well. He wasn't there originally. We can look with technology, we can look behind the surface of the paint using infrared and see what Van Eyck drew on the panel before he started to paint it. The dog is an afterthought. There's no drawing for him where there is for most everything else here. Right? Did they just buy a dog? Did they ask him to put it in? Symbolically, dogs are fidelity, fido, right? Dogs are symbols of faithfulness. So placed directly beneath on the axis of the hand, he becomes an enhancement of this theme of their relationship. Faithful and true. I have another detail of his face. I like dogs. I'm sorry, this is looking better on my computer screen. I'm getting rid of it. But you look at the eyes, right? Remember how we saw how Van Eyck, with that scepter that the angel was holding, realized how light hit one side and then kind of reflected back on the other side of it, right? The way it does through jewels. So look at these eyes, right? The outside of the lens here, and the inside of the iris there. Fantastic, right? And he had that photograph to work with, right? He figured it out. And just like the Madonna's hair in the Annunciation that we have, here the dog's hair is painted with every single hair having a highlight and a shadow. Right? They glow. It's a clean dog, isn't it? He's not some dirty mongrel or anything like that. Is that coming from that? Get rid of that. Right? I want to go back also to this idea of faithfulness and look at the chandelier down the time. You'll notice there's one candle burning still. Right? If this is an image of a relationship, then a one candle left burning becomes a symbol of unity. Just as the dog below it, again, almost on axis over their hands. Right? It becomes a symbol of fidelity. These things all tie together. As a symbol or as a picture of a relationship, you'll notice that the picture also neatly divides along that middle axis, right? He's on one side, he dominates this half of the building. See see how on the other side she turns dominates this half. And those two halves, each on a certain level, symbolize their half of the marriage pair. What is his role in the couple? What is her role in the couple? And if we look at his side is outside. Open window. Right? Not even with the mullion glass you see above, but literally wide open. We can see a cherry tree outside the window. He's just come in from outside. He's knocked off his clogs as he's entered the house. His world is the outside world. Just as in a relationship, that's his role, outside of the house. He's the public face. He's the worker. He goes off to his job while she stays home. Again, fantastic details, right? Look at, again, anti-secrets in this kind of glass that we saw in the Annunciation from downtown. Right? How he loved lights and doesn't mean anything here. There's no virgin birth symbolism here because it's not a religious theme. But here we have the shutters that have been closed up over that window, right? During inclement weather. And there are nails that hold it together. Look at this. You got the rust. This coloring of wood coming off the nail head. It's very simple because the rain is here. It's not hot. Right? And change the color of that. We see the mortar between the different stones that have been used to construct that building. Like I said, cherry. A fruiting cherry tree outside. So it's immaculately detailed. And even through the understanding of how these things work, there's a little latch that catches the shutters as they come closed, right? Comes over like that before it's shut. Leaving nothing to impressionism, leaving nothing to sort of being vaguely depicted. Everything is very, very tightly depicted. There's Arnolfini's clogs. You can see through time he's changed the size of Arnolfini's feet. That may have been Arnolfini saying, hey, my feet aren't that big. But the paint has gone a little transparent over time, and so we can see where they originally were. Look at the clogs, though. They got mud on them. Right? They've got a heel. Look at the heel of the one's closest to us. That's been chopped up from walking on the cobblestones outside. Right? The norm was to wear these leather shoes when you went inside, and you wore the clogs outside to protect your leather shoes. Right? It's easy to get those again. But the leather shoes are much more expensive. Right? So he chucked those things on and go outside his great toes as well. Right? But you can see where the heel from walking on the cobbles has been chipped away a bit. Right? Again, fantastic amount of detail. So this is his side, right? He's coming from the outside. The outside world is Giovanni. His wife is the inside world. She has this daybed where she greets visitors who come in, right? She has this chair where she greets visitors who come in. There are her slippers. She, too, is missing her shoes just like him. Maybe there's a unity thing there. They both have their slippers off, as they're both here. Sexism. She's got a whisk broom. Not that she did much housework herself, probably. They're of a class that certainly would not have done their own housework. Again, he's moved it, and you can see the paint's gone transparent. The carving up above, the woman praying on top of that dragon, is St. Margaret. St. Margaret is the patron saint of childbirth. That, again, associates with her role. He goes out and makes the money, she stays home and has the kids. There are two Giovanni Arnolfinis in Bruges. Neither of them had kids. Ever. Right? So this is a hope for that. And it always comes up, is she pregnant? Because she kind of looks it, doesn't she? Right? Got her hand on top of it. But really what that hand is doing is showing off the draperies. Look at what I've got. Right? Letting it hang out rather than drop down to the ground. And if we look at other paintings by Van Eyck, we'll do a 10-minute art space that talks about the Ghent altarpiece. But if you look at E in the upper right corner of the Ghent altarpiece, you can see that this is kind of the ideal body type. E isn't meant to be pregnant either. If this is a northern body type, it is based on ancient Roman art. It's based on something altogether different. She looks pregnant because that's an ideal state. Right? She could be pregnant, healthfully. So, The bride is certainly not pregnant here. Her body shape is based on her affected body shape that we see through the clothing, and we know for a fact that she never had kids. Right? So she's in fact showing off. So we've got one more detail to look at here, which is the mirror in the background. And we'll come to this on whatever the next thing we meet Monday, right? Today's Thursday. On Monday we'll look at the mirror. We'll look at 2 or 3 other works of art from this region and wrap up 15th century Northern Europe.